Are you guys ready? We can go over the assignment real quick like.
Are you ready?
I was born ready, I tell you. So your assignment, 1C, here we go. Let's take a look here. We got for question number 1 was, suppose Digby wanted to reduce its leverage ratio, and we would want to do that on occasion, okay? And in this case, by using cash to pay down its debt, what amount would have been necessary for Digby to have achieved a leverage ratio? And they define leverage ratio as asset divided by equity. That one's different than what we used in banking. We typically used a debt to equity ratio. If you used it, we kind of like the debt to equity ratio to be no more than 1 to 1, no more debt than an equal amount of equity, if that makes sense. So if they had $100 of equity, they'd have $100 of debt as well, which would be a leverage ratio of about 2 to 1 then, because you'd have twice as many assets then in that case. So anyhow, the equation is pretty simple, right? It's simply leverage is equal to assets divided by equity. And so in this case, the leverage that we're shooting for is 2, or 2.0, right? And that's equal to my assets divided by my equity. My equity doesn't change, right? When I use cash to pay down debt, my equity amount does not change, bless you. Okay, so my equity amount remains the same, so my 2.0 is equal to assets divided by equity of $53,539,000. So magic of algebra, my assets then are equal to 2 times the $53,539,000. So the assets that I would have wanted to have been at would have been $107 million and change. And then the assets that I did have was $127 million, and so to take it to the conclusion, to figure out how much I'd have needed to pay down would have been $14,573,000. And I think Digby had a little over $16 million in cash, so they actually could have done that. It would have made their margin pretty narrow then on the cash thing. And of course, going in when you're doing your projections and whatnot, it's hard to figure those things out ahead of time. So I budget for those particular things. But okay, question 2. How much money did Erie leave on the table in the low end? Again, this is just taking this equation one step further, really, and we're adding the tax consequences to this. In other words, net after taxes, how much more could Erie have made if Ebb had sold to its potential? And I wanted you to just look at Ebb here to make it a little bit more simple. Okay, and Ebb, by my calculations anyhow, I think 27.2 is what its potential was. Potential was 27.2, its actual was 19.7. So doing that math, I come up with they missed out on 7.5%. The total unit demand for that segment was 10,089,000. So I take the 7.5% times that. You guys check my math on these two. I kind of had fat fingers this morning when I was going through this a little bit. So 756,675 units is what they could have sold. You might have rounded that to 757. That's fine. Calculated their gross profit per item, which is simply their price minus their marginal variable costs. 20 minus 645 is material, I believe, 847 labor. So I come up with a little over $5, $5.08 as a gross profit per item. You might have added a step to this, the way I was doing it in the past. Okay, you might have calculated your sales first and then deducted your variable costs, and that's fine. Okay, that's kind of how I was doing it in the past instead of just skipping that step and coming to the gross profit per item. So my number of units that I missed out on times my gross profit per item gives me an overall gross profit of about $3.8 million. Tax rate, 35%. How'd I get the tax rate? I think it tells you in the guide, okay? But another way to do it quite simply, and that's what I did, was pick a team, any team that's got a positive that had a profit, okay? Start with Andrews. If you took their their EBIT, or earnings before interest and taxes, comes up 19.3, right? Subtract from that its interest, then you end up with its earnings before taxes, which is 12.5 million, somewhere around there. I'm kind of roughing this. Then you divide the taxes by the earnings before taxes. So their tax amount was 4.4 million divided by their earnings before taxes of about 12.5 million, and you should come up with 34.9987, whatever. Okay, so 35%, rounded to 35% was an easier way than going back and checking out the guide. If you did that math for any one of these teams that showed a profit, actually for the teams that showed a loss as well, you'd come up with that same amount of money, or same percentage, sorry. So I take the missed gross profit of 3.85 million times 35%. I calculate what my taxes would have been, 1.3.5 million. I subtract that from the 3.8 million, and I should come up with about 2.5 million then in missed after-tax earnings. Okay. Yeah. Net income, missed net income was 2.5 million. It's pretty substantial. Yeah, pretty substantial for early in the game. Would have made a lot of difference in Erie's case. 3. Doing a little forecasting. So Ferris is forecasting sales next round in the high-end segment. It's estimating that it's going to sell 490 units of Fist, its high-end product. Ferris wants to have an extra 10% of units on hand above and beyond its forecast in case sales are better than expected. It would risk the possibility of excess inventory, so we'd rather have excess inventory than have stockouts. Okay. Taking current inventory into account, so we got to go look up what the current inventory is. What will Ferris's production have to be in order to have a 10% reserve of units available for sale? Okay, and then I said bonus for including the adjustment. So they want to have, they're estimating they're going to sell 490, but they want to have 10% above that, so that's pretty simple math, right? My 490 times my 1 plus my 10%. Should give me a desired beginning inventory then of 539. I don't know if beginning inventory is the right term because we're going to actually be producing these throughout the year, but that's the term I threw out there. So the 539 minus my inventory was 109, and I ended up then with the overall production needed of 430. What's the adjustment? What's the adjustment? Anybody read about that in the guide? No.
Seems to be based on that actual product. Each one's a little bit different, but it was about 92%.
Should be 99%, or the adjustment's actually 1%. And all it is, the adjustment's just a simple fact that they figure that you're going to have some seconds or some flaws, okay, in a small amount of your production, because most manufacturers do. And so in this, if you look at your production, if you guys go make production decisions, you'll see if you order 2,000 units of production, you should end up with 1,980 units actually being produced. We'll take a look, Jed. Yeah, should be.
Doesn't it change with AP leg?
Doesn't it change with what?
When you change your AP leg and manufacturers start withholding parts from you.
That's possible when you change your AP. That I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and check the guide on that, so it could be. Everybody understand what he's saying there? You might have a production lag if you're not paying your suppliers in a timely fashion within that 30-day period that's normal. That's the default. If you change that and you pay them later in order to save some cash maybe, okay, they might not send you the parts, and so your production could actually be affected by that. Okay. The normal is 99%. If yours is different, I'll be happy to take a look at that. So let you show that to me. Okay, 4. What was the cost or total expense of Erie's emergency loan or Baldwin? Do either one. I did Erie's. They had an emergency loan of $16.126 million. Uncle Al's fee, right in the guide, is 7.5%. Okay. So you just take 7.5% times the 16.1 million, you come up with $1.2 million. There is the fee. Okay, interest rate might change. So between Andrews and you guys might not have known. So you kind of needed to look at your own current interest rate, and if you applied that, if yours was 10.5, okay, fine. I'm not going to argue with you. I hope you put it down. Hope you wrote it down in your assignment, so I kind of knew what you were coming. Because everybody's current interest rate is going to be a little bit different. It's kind of based on your financial statement. So, but it should be around there, right? Should have been 10.5, 11, 11.5, somewhere in that neighborhood. So if you have 8% down there, that's probably not correct. Okay, unless you want to show me that. So if you had something remarkably different and you want to show me that your particular rate that you came up with was remarkably different, that's fine. I used 11%. I think that's what Erie was at, was 11. They might have been 11, 11.5, but at 11%, the interest cost on that would have been about 1.8 million. Add the two together, we should be around 3 million, and that's what we were. So pretty dang expensive. So I kind of picked on Erie. Look at that. Erie gave up $2.5 million in profits here, okay, and gave up $3 million here in interest and fee expense. So, you know, what's that? $5.5 million. That certainly would have. And this is after tax. This is before tax, right? Because you get the tax benefit of that, and so their after tax benefit here would only been about $2 million. But still, that's $4.5 million after tax. What would that have done? Wow. That would put Erie to, well, you broke even. So you just about broke even. Still wouldn't have won the round, but you'd have been positive anyhow. So, any questions on the assignment? You guys are ready for round 2, I hope. I presume that's what we're on, round 2. So, all right, I'll close this up and you guys can get after it.